For 9 years, my father and my uncle lived on adjoining quarters of Dakota prairie and did not speak one word to each other, though their two houses stood within sight across a single fence. And I grew up believing that the silence between them was as permanent as the land itself. And then, in the winter I was 10 years old, a 3-day blizzard did the thing that 9 years of neighbors and preachers and my own grandmother on her deathbed had not been able to do, which was to put those two proud men under one roof. And it did it by making the plain arithmetic of survival louder than the pride of two brothers who had sworn never to need each other again. My name is Peter Ansett, and the two men were my father, Karl, and his younger brother, my uncle Emil, and I am the one who was there, a boy of 10, carried across the snow in the middle of it. And so it falls to me to tell how the storm ended a war that people had come to believe would never end. It is not a story about beating the winter, everyone in it very nearly lost. It is a story about the one thing the winter taught two men who thought they had nothing left to learn from each other. You have to understand the feud first, or the storm means nothing, and I will tell it plainly, though it shames the family, because the shame is the point. My father and my uncle had come to Dakota together, young men from Wisconsin, two brothers who had been close as brothers can be, and they had taken adjoining quarters, meaning to farm side by side and grow old as neighbors, the way it was supposed to go. And then, in the second year, they had quarreled. I will not pretend the quarrel was over something grand, because it was not. Most of the worst quarrels are not. It was over the boundary, and a well, and some words said in heat about a debt. The ordinary small poisons that get into families, and it had festered, the way such things do, when two people are too proud and too alike to be the first to bend. Hard words had led to harder ones, and then to none at all. And by the time I was old enough to notice, my father and my uncle had not spoken in years, and the not speaking had become its own thing, bigger than whatever had started it, a wall of silence that both of them tended and neither would climb. They divided everything a fence could divide. They divided the family. My grandmother, before she died, could not get them in a room together, and it broke her heart, and they would not bend even for that. My mother and my aunt, who had been friends, were forbidden the friendship and made to carry the coldness they had not chosen. And we children, my cousins and I, were raised within shouting distance of each other and not permitted to play, so that I grew up watching my own cousins across a fence the way you watch strangers, and knew the shapes of them and not their voices. It was a stupid, sad, ordinary human ruin. Two brothers who had turned the whole strength of their love for each other, inside out, into a stubbornness just as strong. And everyone around them suffered it, and no one could fix it. Because you cannot fix a thing that both of the only two people who could fix it have decided to die inside of. Here is the thing about my father and my uncle that everybody remarked on, and that I have to tell you now because it is the heart of everything. And it is not an object or a keepsake. It is a way the two of them had that was exactly the same. They whistled. Both of them, when they worked, whistled the same way, low and tuneless through their teeth, a habit they had off their own father, and it was the strangest thing to hear, because you could stand at the fence between the two farms on a still day and hear my father whistling low at his chores on one side, and my uncle whistling the very same way at his chores on the other. The same breath, the same nothing tune. Two men who had not spoken in 9 years, making the identical sound their father had made, each of them, I think, not even knowing he did it, and certainly not knowing the other did. My mother used to stand and listen to it with the saddest face, the two of them whistling their father's whistle across the fence at each other, and calling it silence. I did not understand, when I was small, why it made her look like that. I understand it now. She was hearing how alike they still were, under all of it, how they could not even do their chores without proving they were brothers, and how neither of them could hear it. Now I will tell you the situation the winter found them in, because the whole of what happened turns on it, and it is the plainest kind of arithmetic. In their pride, each brother had built his farm to need nothing from the other, and each had, in the way of proud men, built himself lopsided, strong where he was strong, and blind to where he was weak. My father was a builder and a woodsman. He had a fine, tight house and a great store of wood, for he cut and hauled all autumn like a man possessed, and his buildings were warm and sound. But my father was no hand with stock, and had let his herd run down, and he was careless about his water, for his own well had gone bad, and he had been hauling from the creek and putting off the digging of a new one, telling himself it could wait till spring. My uncle Emil was the opposite man entirely. He was a born stockman, with the best animals in the township, and a deep, sound well of sweet water and a full cellar, for he and my aunt were savers and providers. But my uncle was a poor builder and a worse woodsman. His house was a draughty, ill-chinked thing he had never finished right, and he was always short of wood, running his fuel close every winter, borrowing against the spring, trusting the mild spells to let him haul more. 2 brothers, and between the 2 of them, they had everything a family needed to winter safely on that prairie: wood and water and warmth and stock and food. And each of them had exactly half of it, and each was missing exactly what the other had, and their pride had made them each pretend that the half he had was the whole. For 9 years, the ordinary winters had let them get away with it. An ordinary Dakota winter had thaws in it, breaks in the weather, days when a man could get to town, or get to the creek, or get out to haul a load of wood, and so each brother's weakness never quite killed him. My father could always get to the creek for water in a thaw. My uncle could always scrape up more wood in a break. The mildness of the ordinary year was the thing that let 2 half-prepared men both survive, and let each go on believing he needed no one, because he had never yet met the winter that would show him he was wrong. The winter I was 10 was not an ordinary winter, and it did not have mercy in it, and it found both brothers exactly at the weak place each had left open. The blizzard came down in the middle of January with very little warning, the way the worst ones do, and it came to stay. It shut down the whole country in a few hours, a howling whiteout of wind and snow and falling cold that made it impossible to see your own hand or stand against the wind, and it did not let up that night or the next day or the next. 3 days it blew, and the cold under it went down past anything we had a number for, and the snow drifted higher than the fences, and then higher than the doors, and there was no getting out, no getting to town, no getting to the creek, no getting anywhere at all. The world shrank to the inside of whatever walls you were behind when it started, and you lived, or you did not, on whatever you had inside those walls, because for 3 days there was no reaching anything outside them. The storm did not care that the brothers had divided everything. It was about to show them what their division was worth. In my father's warm and solid house, with its great woodpile, we ran out of water. It happened faster than my father would have believed. The creek was a mile off, and might as well have been 100, unreachable in the whiteout, and his own well was bad, and what water we had stored was a day's worth, no more, because he had always been able to fetch more, and had never learned to fear running short. By the 2nd day, the animals we had were suffering, and we were melting snow on the stove, which anyone who has done it knows is a slow, fuel-hungry, miserable business that gives you a cupful for a potful of snow. And my father, warm as his house was, stood at the window looking at the white nothing, and understood that a man cannot drink heat, and that he was rich in the one thing and poor to death in the other, and that the thing he was poor in was the thing my uncle across the fence had in deep, sweet abundance. And in my uncle's house, a 1/4 mile away, with its full cellar and its fine stock and its good, deep well, they were running out of wood. My uncle had trusted to a thaw that did not come, as he always had, and his fuel had been low when the storm hit, and his house was a drafty sieve that ate what fire he could make, and by the second night my Uncle Emil, with a well full of water he could not keep from freezing, and a cellar full of food, and the best stock in the county shivering in a poorly built barn, was burning his furniture, and watching his children shiver, and understanding that a man cannot eat wood or drink it either, and that he was rich in everything but the one thing that kept the cold out, and that the thing he was dying for want of was the thing his brother across the fence had stacked in ricks higher than a man's head. Two brothers in two houses within sight of each other, each freezing or thirsting for exactly the thing the other had in plenty, and 9 years of silence between them frozen harder than the ground. I have thought about that second night my whole life, the two houses full of suffering people a quarter-mile apart, and the thing that had to break before anyone could be saved, which was not the storm. The storm would break on its own in a day. The thing that had to break was older and harder than the storm, and would not break on its own at all. And both my father and my uncle knew that second night, lying awake with their families cold or thirsty around them, exactly what the answer was, and exactly what it would cost their pride. And that is the true middle of this story, the long, dark hours in which two proud men each lay in his own trap, knowing that the only door out of it was the brother he had not spoken to in 9 years. My father broke first. I want that written down, because he told it himself ever after, and never let it be softened, that he was the one who broke first, and he told it not as a shame, but as the best thing he ever did. On the morning of the third day, with the storm still blowing, but a little less, my father got up in the dark and put on every stitch he had, and told my mother he was going to Emil's. She was afraid, for a man could die in a quarter-mile in that weather, had died in less. But my father had done his arithmetic, and his arithmetic had beaten his pride at last, and he said the thing I never forgot, that he would rather freeze crossing that field to his brother than watch his children thirst 40 rods from his brother's well out of pride. And he tied a rope to the door, my father, the woodsman, who knew how such things were done, and he paid it out behind him and went out into the white, roaring nothing toward his brother's house, following the fence line he had stared at in hatred for 9 years. And it saved his life now, that fence, because he could feel his way along it when he could not see. And here is the thing that undid me when I finally understood it, that my mother told me years later. My father did not arrive to a locked door and a cold welcome that he had to argue his way past. He met my Uncle Emil in the field. Halfway between the two houses, in the blizzard, on the fence line, the two brothers nearly walked into each other in the white, each of them out in the killing storm at the same hour, on the same errand, because my uncle had broken that same morning too, had done the same arithmetic in his freezing house, and reached the same answer, and tied his own rope to his own door, and set out toward my father's woodpile at the very moment my father set out toward his well. They had not planned it, they could not have, they had not spoken. They had simply, each of them, after 9 years and 1 killing night, come to the same place at the same time by the same road, because they were the same man underneath. And they met in the middle of it, in the storm, at the fence, and my mother said that when my father told of it, his voice would go, every time, at the part where he described what it was to see a shape come out of the whiteness toward him, and know, before he could see the face, by the way it moved, by God, by the way it whistled, that it was his brother coming to him, as he was going to his brother. I do not know what words passed between them in that field, if any did. My father would never say. It was the one part he kept. I think perhaps none did. I think two men who had not needed words to hate each other did not need them to stop. I think they just turned together in the storm and went to the work that had to be done, because there was no time for anything else, and both of them knew it. And the not speaking that had taken 9 years to build simply ended in a snowfield, because the alternative was to bury each other's children. And neither of them, when it came to it, when the winter finally asked the question plainly, was willing to do that. What they did was the only sane thing, and it was the thing they could have done any easy winter of the 9 and had been too proud to do. They put the two families together. They brought my uncle's people and my uncle's stock across to my father's warm, sound, wood-rich house, and they brought my father's need to my uncle's deep well and full cellar. And they made, for the last day and night of that storm, one household out of 2. One whole, safe, wintering family out of 2 lopsided, half-safe ones. My father's wood warmed my uncle's children. My uncle's water saved my father's stock and ours. My mother and my aunt, forbidden their friendship for 9 years, worked side by side in the one kitchen, as if the 9 years had been a single bad afternoon. And we children, my cousins and I, who had watched each other across a fence like strangers all our lives, were shut up together in a warm loft through a blizzard, and were playing like the cousins we were inside of an hour. Because children have no pride to get over, and had only been waiting all along to be let. I promised I would make the plain sense of it clear, and it is a different sense than the winter usually teaches, and I have come to think it is the truer one. All the other hard weather wisdom is about a man and the sky, about preparing and enduring and outwitting the weather. This was not about the weather. The weather was only the thing that finally made the truth too loud to ignore. And the truth was that my father and my uncle had never, either one of them, been whole. Each had built a life that was strong in half the ways a life needs to be strong, and helpless in the other half, and had covered the helpless half with pride, and had gotten away with it only because the ordinary years were merciful enough to never test the weak place. They were not 2 self-sufficient men who happened to quarrel. They were 2 halves of one properly provided farm who had cut themselves apart and then each pretended to be whole, and the winter did not create their need for each other. It only revealed a need that had been true the entire 9 years. On every single one of those days they spent whistling their father's whistle across the fence in silence. They had needed each other all along. The blizzard just turned the lights on. Mind, it was a near thing, and I will not tell it as though the reconciliation made everything safe, because for a day it very nearly came too late. My uncle's stock suffered badly before it was got to shelter and water, and he lost some good animals that a day's less pride would have saved. My father's people, us, were closer to real harm from the thirst than my father ever liked to admit. If either brother had broken even 1 day later than he did, or if the storm had run 1 day longer than it did, the meeting in the field would have come too late for somebody, and this would be a different story, a bitter one, the kind that ends in a small grave and a lifelong regret. They were saved not only by breaking at last, but by breaking barely in time, and by a mercy in the storm's length that they had not earned, and both of them knew it after, and it was part of what changed them. A man who has come within 1 day of letting his pride kill his brother's children does not easily go back to being proud. The storm blew itself out on the 4th morning, and the sun came up on a white, still world, and the 2 families dug out together, and here is the part I am gladdest to tell, the part that makes this not a story about a storm, but a story about 2 men. The feud did not come back. When the roads opened and it would have been possible for each brother to go back to his own house and his own silence and take up the old wall where he had left it, they did not. Something had happened in that field and in that crowded, warm house that could not be unhappened. They had seen each other need and be needed, and there is no going back across that. They did not become all at once easy with each other. They were not those kind of men, and 9 years is 9 years. But they spoke. They spoke that spring and worked, slowly, at the boundary and the well and the old debt, the very things that had started it, and found, as men usually find, that the things were small and had only ever been made large by the pride poured into them. And within a year, the fence between the two farms had a gate in it that had never been there before, cut by the two of them together, and the whistling across it was answered now, out loud, one brother to the other, in words. They farmed side by side for 30 more years, and grew old as neighbors after all, the way it was supposed to go, before they broke it. And they were closer in those 30 years, I think, than they had been even before the quarrel, the way a mended bone is said to be strongest at the break. And they never spoke of the 9 years, but they never hid them either. My father would tell the story of the meeting in the field to anyone, always the same way, always breaking at the same place, always ending by saying that the smartest thing he ever did in his life, he did because a blizzard finally made him too desperate to be a fool, and that a man should not need a killing storm to teach him to cross a field to his own brother, but that he had, and he thanked God the storm came before it was too late, because he had not been going to cross that field on his own, not ever, and he knew it. I am an old man now, and my father and my uncle are long gone, buried in the same churchyard not far apart, and their farms are one farm now, held by their grandchildren together, the fence with the gate in it long since taken out entirely. People hear this story, and they think it is about surviving a blizzard, and I suppose it is, but that is the smallest part of it. The blizzard was easy. Blizzards end. What is hard is the thing the blizzard broke, the pride between two people who love each other and have turned it into stone. And that is the storm that kills more families than any weather ever did. And it does not blow itself out in 3 days, and there is no rope you can follow through it. And most people never do cross that field, and their silence just goes on until the grave takes one of them and makes it permanent. My father and my uncle were luckier than they deserved. A storm came hard enough and in time enough to make them do the thing they should have done freely, and they got 30 good years for it that they had thrown away and been given back. You cannot always count on a storm to save you from your own pride. That is the thing I would have you take from it. If there is a field between you and someone you have turned to stone against, cross it now, in the good weather, while it is only a field, and do not wait for the blizzard that may come too late, or may not come at all, and leave you both to freeze in sight of each other's fires, with everything you each needed stacked warm in the other's house. Now, this family is ours, but here is what is true. On the open northern plains, a blizzard could shut a family in completely for days, cutting them off from water, from town, from fuel, from neighbors a quarter-mile away. And people really did die within sight of shelter, unable to cross the whiteout to reach it. A rope run between house and barn, or house and fence, was a real and necessary way to keep from being lost in the few steps between them. Settlers really did survive such storms by combining households, sharing fuel, water, food, and shelter, because few single families were provisioned strongly in every single thing at once, and the community that shared came through where the isolated did not. And the deepest truth here is the oldest one we know, that human beings are made to need each other, that pride which pretends otherwise is a kind of slow disaster, and that the strength two people waste on a feud is exactly the strength they need to survive. The brothers and their farms are imagined. The killing storm, the rope across the snow, the joining of households, and the plain, hard truth that no one winters alone are exactly as they were.